Okay, you are good to go.
Thank you, Eric. Good evening. My name is Annie Stevenson, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Annapolis Environmental Commission. And we're calling our meeting to order this evening at 7 o'clock, September 22nd. The first item on our list is to do the roll call. If everyone could pipe up, I'd appreciate it. Our guests too, please.
Allison Colden, Ward 7 representative.
Jeremy Hansen, Ward 5.
Randy, are you able to come up?
Yes, I'm sorry. Randy Rowell here, Eastport representative, East Puerto Ricans.
Are those all the commission members?
That's it.
Okay. Well, this is Jackie, Deputy City Manager, Jackie Dial.
And this is Racine, Environmental Programs Coordinator.
I saw Bill on there. Alderman Rob Savage.
Oh yeah, there's Bill O'Leary.
Hi, sorry I'm late. Bill O'Leary, Ward 2.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Our first item of business is to approve the July minutes. I wasn't present at that meeting, so I have to recuse myself, but we do have enough other members present to vote. Did everyone have a chance to review those minutes? Does anyone have any changes for the record?
I also was not present, so I can't weigh in.
Annie,
Okay.
One correction for the minutes, so maybe we'll make that and then vote on it next time if we need to. But in the discussion about Providence Point, I just need to correct Gerald Weingrad's name. I think he's in there as Weingarten. That was the only correction I found.
Thanks. We can easily make that change. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think it's the majority of active members. So that would be 4 of us out of 7, since we're not a commission of 9. But if Jeremy and I both can't vote, I think you're right. We do have to wait. So we'll make that change. We'll circulate it with the rest of the team and add it to the October agenda. Thanks, Allison. Okay. All righty. Well, then next on the list is Alderman Savage. He was going to give us an update on the Forest Conservation Bill. And then I believe Allison's going to lead us through a discussion on our position on the ordinance for the removal of large trees. Rob, over to you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ann. Just bringing up I'm trying to find some of my notes here. And there are 2 pieces of legislation, environmental pieces of legislation that are going through the process right now. We only have 3 meetings left. And so I think they'll be able to make it through in time, but it's going to be certainly close. The one, as I think I've briefed the commission before, would close 2 Forest Conservation Act loopholes. One of the loopholes deals with if a property changes hand and the former property owner removes forest, before they even do the mitigation, any kind of required mitigation, what happens when it changes hand to the new owner? Because that's not quite clear in the code. The other loophole deals with mitigation in the Forest Conservation Act, where developers can get credit to reforestation if they do selective clearing. And selective clearing can be important for forest management, but I don't think it's appropriate for mitigation tool. So we've had developers who have tried, well, one developer has tried to take advantage of that loophole with the selective clearing. Another one could potentially take advantage of the language that's not clear on whether or not past mitigation needs to be honored. So that went to the Planning Commission, and I believe it's going to get a favorable recommendation, but they have not written up their findings yet. And so that's going to be coming back hopefully to Environmental Matters Committee at the next meeting of ours. So we're not till October unless I schedule a special meeting. The other ordinance has to do with removal of trees on private property. So currently we have laws that protect property over an acre. That's the forest, that triggers the Forest Conservation Act. So it protects those trees. We have a critical area which protects trees in that area along the coastline. We have trees are protected during construction activity associated with grading permits. But there's no protection. Oh, and also we have public tree protection. So if trees are within 50 feet of a right of way, so 50 feet from a roadway, if they're over 5 inches, the homeowners have to get a permit to take them down. And so we found from some of the information, I think Allison, I contacted you, I think asking about some of the information, but some of the information I've received from this commission and from staff indicated that some of our forest loss is still happening on private property, which is why I'm trying to get this passed. And so the ordinance would require permits for any trees removed in the rear or anywhere on the property if they're over 23 inches. And it doesn't, so based on the public testimony, there's been quite a bit of confusion, and I think it's made some of my colleagues on the council nervous. Just confusion on the public's, and I think they're afraid that this is going to be a huge cost, and that it's going to be some other kind of burden to them and prevent them from doing maintenance on their trees. So the first thing on the maintenance is this doesn't prevent anybody from doing maintenance. They could still do that without even needing a permit. The second part is with having to be a burden is that this doesn't put any kind of, yes, they'd have to pay $100 fee to get a permit, but for these trees that are 23 inches or over or greater, they really require an arborist and a professional company to take them down anyway. You're not going to have a homeowner taking down a tree that large. And so that's going to be thousands of dollars anyway. So the $100 really isn't a burden. And it would also just simply have these arborists who they hire would have to essentially prove the case to the city that that the trees have to come down. They would have to, then the city arborist would also have to agree with that rationale. All that said, I do have 2 amendments I'm working on, trying to respond to some of the public concerns. And unfortunately, I can't find my notes on this right now. But the one amendment would allow the city to, allow the homeowner to, I'm just thinking about this out loud here. So the issue, I guess, with it would allow the city arborist to essentially use his judgment and the department's judgment to determine if any of the mitigation in terms of the replacement, if they remove a tree this large, it have to be replaced with 4 trees. So it gives the arborist a bit more flexibility if it does prove to actually be a hardship, or if the property owner has planted a tree in the past, I think I said 5 years, and not related to any kind of mitigation, then they could get credit for that as a part of removing the new tree. And so it just gives the inspector, the arborist, ability to kind of be flexible in some of the mitigation if it does prove to, again, truly be either a financial hardship or if there's just simply no space on the property to plant things, because that was one of the concerns that some of the folks from the public had. And I'm not sure where my
Well, it looks like Allison has a question for you, so maybe you
Oh,
can
sure. Allison.
answer it while you're digging around.
Thank you. So you answered my first question, which was if the city arborist would have to have a concurrence with the opinion of the hired arborist in order to approve the permit, which it sounds like that's the case. My second question is, does it still include language about having the person doing the inspection not being the same contractor that's being hired to actually remove the tree?
No, we didn't include anything about that.
Okay. And with respect to creating hardships in the mitigation, I'm wondering maybe, I don't know if Jackie would have an opinion on this, but would there be a way for someone who has a permit but maybe has a hardship in the mitigation to qualify for the Replant Annapolis program or get trees possibly through that mechanism, either through like Watershed Stewards Academy or Replant Annapolis? Throw that out there.
Yeah, we haven't thought that through, using that program. I mean, that's not ruling it out, but we just haven't thought of it. But that program is designed for people to be trained on how to select tree sites and plant trees and maintain trees. So possibly if they lived in a community where people were doing that, it might work. I don't want to overcomplicate that program either, though. So we just haven't thought of it with that program.
So that's a good question, Allison, in terms of specifying that the arborist needs to be different from the company removing the tree. I'll have to think about how to word that. If the commission has any recommendations,
But I thought part of the argument was that they have to get the arborist anyway. So I get the point about having, not having the wolf in the hen house type deal, but I thought that was kind of the point, was to make it not more onerous.
Yeah, you're right. That is so. There's one of the things we have to balance, because some of my colleagues are certainly getting a bit nervous about supporting this. So I do have to be careful. So I'm trying to get some of these amendments drafted that will hopefully help get passed.
Rob, I apologize. I don't know very much about this ordinance, and if you've already said I missed it, what will the fee go to? Where will the money go? And could that address Allison's comment about, helping replant in some situations of hardship?
Yeah, that fee, I think, is just a standard fee that goes to planning and zoning. Just like there are other permit fees. I could certainly look at seeing if there's a way we can have that be going towards the reforestation fund.
But it would just cover staff time.
Yeah, that's
And
essentially what it's
Brian's
covering
time.
at the moment. Mhm.
Okay. Allison, could I ask you to say a bit about the letter you wrote on behalf of the AEC?
Yeah, certainly. So hopefully you all saw the letter. I circulated it, and it's also in our Google Drive folder. But on September 7th, I drafted a letter on behalf of the AEC in support of 03421, which is actually the first piece of legislation that Alderman Savage was discussing related to forest stand delineation and the look back for that. So that letter was submitted due to my own mistakes with planning and zoning. It wasn't submitted in time for the planning and zoning public hearing, but it was submitted to environmental matters. And Alderman Savage, I'm not sure if he shared that more broadly, but it was submitted to environmental matters in support of that piece of legislation. And so I think per our guidelines for the AEC, we could draft that letter and circulate that letter, but I think we still need to vote sort of to ratify that.
Yes, I did send that to the rest of the council, so thank you.
I think, Allison, that our vote, and Jackie can weigh in, we don't have our Office of Law representative today, so Jackie has to be wearing more than one hat. But my recollection is that our vote about letters covered things that were within our purview, and forest conservation was one of the topics where we were able to write a letter, not as a full commission, if time was an issue. So I don't think that we need a full vote of support. We certainly could have one for the record just to be nice, but I don't think it's required.
And that's my recollection, Am, on certain topics. You could do that.
So maybe the question that we need to decide this evening as a group is if we're going to write a letter in support of this other bill about the trees on private property.
I should mention that Planning Commission also said that they were aware that Allison had tried to submit the comments, but they had taken up a lot of time anyway with other matters. So they continued the public hearing on the tree ordinance to their next meeting.
Annie, I think we could probably, if it works, there's going to be a lot of the same supporting information and data in support of the large tree removal ordinance as the forest stand delineation. So if folks are comfortable with AEC supporting, I'd be happy to just edit our existing letter to drop in some additional information about that second piece of legislation and just write it more broadly as supporting these changes to Forest Conservation Act.
That sounds good. I wonder if, Rob, you could send us your amendments so we would be able to reference that in Allison's draft.
Yes, I have finally found them, so I will send them along. And yeah, so it gives the arborist the ability to, the department, to waive mitigation and or the fee in lieu if they determine there to be a hardship, or if the property owner has already replanted in the past 5 years, which is unrelated to any previous mitigation. Second Amendment would basically clarify that if there's a larger permit for a larger development site, for example, in this case, something that kicks in or triggers critical area or forest conservation, that they don't have to get separate permits for each individual tree over 30 or over 23 inches. So that the review process for these trees would be just grouped into the larger permits, which it should work fine because the mitigation is actually the same in all of those laws now, I believe. So, but I will send that along. Who should I send that to? Right to Allison?
Yes, please. Paul, you had a comment? Paul, you have your hand up? We can't hear you.
Unmute. Sorry, I just put my hand up to let you know I'm here. I'm sorry for my tardiness, but yes, I had a question for Rob. Rob, the $100 fee is likely for administrative cost. You know me, I'm more carrots than sticks. And do you think it's possible we could get away with a $50? I mean, if people have done some work and have clearly identified the cost, well, that's great. But if it's a little bit more, it covers overhead and it's a generalization, could we do it $50 in the beginning? Because I'm just trying to have my city council people take less heat for adding fees.
Yeah, I will bring that up again with Brian Adams and Sally. I guess I'll just go right to her and see if she thinks this fee is adequate or can be reduced at all.
Well,
So I do
the
want to
fee that
make sure that we're covering the cost of any kind of staff time. Sorry, Jackie.
I think that's okay. I think we need to be consistent with what we require for other tree removals. Right now it's $100. The permit, it's $100.
To remove a tree?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
So-
And Rob's, your fee is for removing trees or also doing maintenance on trees?
There's no fee for maintenance on trees.
Okay. So I look, I don't know this enough, so I'm just asking a kind of an innocent or open or ill-informed question. I'm just, trying to make things lower if possible, so our great council people don't get too much heat.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll talk. Thanks, Paul. I'll talk to Sally a bit about it, but Jackie also has a good point because do we reduce it for these larger trees when we'd be keeping it at $100 for the trees in the front of the property, unless we just reduce them all. But I'll see. I'll look into it.
Jeremy, have a question, comment?
Yeah, I was just wondering if we have any sense of either how often this will apply, like what portion of the city's tree canopy is from trees of this size, like the 23 inches DBH or greater, or how many lots or parcels have one or more trees of that nature. If there is any data that we have that you could elaborate on, just to help me understand, like how many, like, is this going to be rarely necessary, or is this going to be like a pretty commonly, like, are we affecting a lot of parcels and lots for this?
Well, that's a great question, and I'll fully admit I because of how late this was in the session here, wasn't able to get that data first. I was just going off of general comments from staff that they feel like we've closed the loop on some of the large development projects, but that they felt we were still experiencing loss in the backyards, so to speak. I'm not sure, Jackie, if you have any additional information.
Yeah. So that's a great question. I wonder how easily Brian can extrapolate that data from his tree survey. But that Rob introduced this legislation largely in response to how many large trees were coming down. So we won't have a very much need for it if we don't do it, if we don't have this ordinance, I feel, because people will just continue to take the large trees down. We have downtown and in Eastport and older sections of the city, we do have quite a few large trees, and the large trees are what really help our tree canopy. Even when we require mitigation, it goes very, very, doesn't go far at all to making up for that large tree that came down. So we really want to discourage that from happening. And unfortunately, we didn't have any control over trees in backyards that weren't within 50 feet of a right of way, like an alley or a side street. So I think it's being planning and zoning and city manager and mayor, no one had a bad reaction to it. Everyone thought it was a great idea, because it seems that most of the reports we get are backyard trees that are coming down, and people are asking, what can we do? And it happens a lot in Eastport. It seems to happen a lot with people who just move in. It's a new resident who decides he doesn't like that large magnolia tree that won't let grass grow under it. And then those are the trees that come down. So I do think it'll be beneficial. We'll protect a lot of trees, as we do have quite a few large trees in Annapolis. And without it, we're just going to keep losing tree canopy. And after the tornado, we can't really afford that. We lost a lot. If you drive down 665, it looks like a dinosaur went through.
That is, Jackie, a good point. Transition to one of the other comments I had, and really a question for the commission, because this is just testimony I received today. The council received, I think it was today or yesterday, and they had concerns about if, for example, a number of trees were damaged on their property from the storm, and they don't. I think what they're essentially saying is that, well, what if the tree's damaged and threatening the house or leaning on the house, and would they have to go through the whole permit process just to take it down? And on the one hand, I don't think staff would be enforcing that to be sticklers in that regard. I think they'd use common sense and just let them take it down and not have to worry about a permit. But I do wonder if it's something that should be included in the legislation. That I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud about this. If we should clearly allow trees to be removed if they represent imminent danger or threat. But the problem with that is it can also be very subjective. People are often just afraid their trees are going to fall all in their house without any indication that it's actually going to do so. So I don't know if it's worth trying to work that in or not.
Well, since we already get that excuse quite often, even when it's not legitimate, I would caution against it. Like we get the tree's too close to the house all the time, and then Brian goes out or he has one of the certified other arborists go out, and there's really no problem with the tree. They can grow pretty close to houses, the big ones, because they have such an extensive root network to keep them upright. Trimming branches back is always permitted.
I think if you wanted to sort of think broadly about the concept of hardship, maybe you could argue that already falls within the amendment that you're discussing, giving the the city arborist discretion to waive those requirements. You might already cover it with that. And Jeremy, it doesn't directly answer your question, but I pulled up the tree canopy report. It doesn't list it in DBH, but there is a histogram of the size of trees that are lost. And they are the majority being lost in the 20 to 50 foot tall height classes. Again, I'm not sure how that translates in terms of DBH, but that is supporting Jackie's comments from earlier that the majority of trees that are being lost are in that larger size and height, which are contributing to the canopy loss.
Is Smokey ready for a vote?
I busted.
I wonder, Allison, to get back to your question of Jackie, if about how we might help folks replant trees. I wonder if we could include in our letter a request that we think about, what the homeowner education and outreach and, sort of tree canopy support that we as a community might provide as part of this. So to, as Paul would say, a few more carrots, or at least make it seem like there's folks to help.
Yeah, I can include something like that, and we can maybe identify some programs or materials that we are collectively aware of that we can ask that during the permit process information be provided on these things. Maybe backyard buffers or something.
That sounds great. Thanks. Okay, any final comments or questions for Rob or for Allison before we vote on writing a letter in support?
This is Bill. I am sorry, I'm still a little hung up on the issue of the fox in the hen house. So the arborist that would potentially be earning money for cutting the tree down is the same one that is doing the inspection. I thought we had talked about in our July meeting how that seems like a conflict of interest. So I'm still a little confused on that point.
Yeah, keep in mind, Bill, that the way it's written, I mean, you're right, but the way it's written, the city arborist has the final say. So if the city arborist has some reason to disagree with the assessment or analysis from the company, he can simply deny the permit.
Okay.
So there is at least some oversight in that case.
And I also had a question about non-native trees. If there was an otherwise healthy non-native tree that the homeowner wanted to take down and replace with a native tree, is that a qualification for an approval?
It's not listed. That's another good point. Yeah, it's not listed, but I think that's also something where the city arborist can step in and rule on that. I mean, in some cases, even a non-native tree is still desirable, but in some cases it may just be too invasive or impactful for a variety of reasons, or perhaps just being a host to pests, like in the case of Ailanthus, a tree of heaven. Because they're the host tree for the lanternfly. So there could be some circumstances where it might make sense to take them down.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bill. I see Randy's hand. Jeremy and Paul.
Randy, you're on mute.
Or maybe you have to switch speaker or mic settings. Still not hearing you.
Maybe while Randy figures that out, you can go ahead, Jeremy. I can only see one of you at a time, so I'm a little bit at a disadvantage.
I guess I was trying to just get a little more clarity on the process then. So for that largest class of trees, if the arborist has as you describe it, the final say, then that tree can't be removed. Is there an appeal process? Does this go to other boards or commissions? I'm just trying to understand the transparency or the process involved. And it does just make me nervous involving the city arborist in the sense of, without having that data of like the scope of this, like, are we adding like this review and decision from the arborist on like 5 permits a year, 100, 300? I just would really like to know the scope of this.
Yeah, those are also good questions. I don't have an estimate on numbers, but I know we've asked Brian, the arborist, if he thought he could handle this as a part of his current workload, and he said he could. He's been one of the folks pushing for this, because I think he also wants the ability that's in this legislation that allows him to basically, if a contractor gets, I think if they get 2 violations, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3, I think it's 2 violations in a year, they can essentially get blacklisted by the city, so they won't be able to apply for any permits or get any in the city for that period of time if they take down a tree illegally. Your other question, in terms of the appeals, this would most likely get appealed to the Building Board of Appeals. That's where I have to double check though, but that's typically where anything from Chapter 17 and I think 14 would go. But I'll need to look into that as well.
That's correct. If there's a decision by a director, and if Brian be under Sally Nash, the Department of Planning and Zoning, then appeals go to the Building Board of Appeals. Decisions from the Building Board of Appeals are appealable to the Circuit Court for Anne Arundel County. What I was going to say to Jeremy's question about whether it creates more work for Brian, Brian's indicated it does it's something that he can handle. However, it will reduce other work that Brian has in responding to the frantic calls from residents that someone's taking down a tree again. So if we have to do a good job of publicizing that this is a new requirement, you can't just take down trees in your backyard. You know, we have to educate, do public education and outreach, but that the new ordinance should diminish the number of occurrences of people taking down trees to which Brian has to respond. You're hoping that it has some deterrent effect and that he's not running out, you know, as often as he does now to catch someone in the middle of taking down a large tree or already having taken one down. And all he's left with is fining and mitigation at that point.
Can you hear me now? Okay, cool. I had it on. I had my computer on mute, not my thing. But anyway, this comment or question was kind of around the tornado storm kind of discussion. As it made me think about some vulnerable communities that are, you know, low income that were impacted by the storm, particularly Annapolis Gardens, where many lives were changed as a result of that storm. And it made me think about environmental resiliency. And it made me think about a fund of some sort that would exist to assist low-income communities that are impacted by environmental disasters. Does that exist? Can we make something like that exist, a memo or something? So maybe something we could, you know, plan out in the long term, or to kind of pull that together, the infrastructure. And also as it relates to the playground areas in some of these low-income communities from flooding and just degradation, just very poor quality, immense amount of flooding, and kind of just not very safe because I know I brought this up before about safety being an environmental concern. So when it comes to that storm, it just really triggered me to think about, you know, back to some of the discussions we've had in the past. And I just wanted to see if there was any you know, policy or things in place that address this from a environmental resiliency, sustainability kind of viewpoint.
Yeah, Randy, if I can jump in on that. So that is a renewed, we don't have a written policy on prioritizing trees or stormwater in lower income neighborhoods, but that is the approach we're taking. I discussed this over the summer with Director Johnson of Public Works, and that stormwater restoration, you know, we looked, as you know, we have that contract with Greenvest where we're doing the Back Creek and the Spot Creek watersheds, but that's not all we're doing. We can jump around to other areas, and we've decided we need to take a fresh look at all the feasibility studies that were done for all of Annapolis and see if there are low-income neighborhoods that have existing stormwater problems, because some neighborhoods were built before stormwater controls were required. So we need to look at, you know, of course we have to address the areas around the city that are being impacted the worst. But we know that there are some communities whose basements flood or parking lots flood because they lack stormwater controls, completely lack them. So they are moving up on the list. He's doing a reassessment. And then low-income neighborhoods, Brian Adam is targeting for street trees, and also as part of Replant Annapolis to engage those communities as tree troopers and train them. We spoke with HACA, and they are open to working with the city as tree planting sites, especially as we redo Newtown 20 and then move on to the other communities. I noted when we were at Newtown 20 over 3 years ago, there were no trees around the playgrounds. There was no shady places for the kids to hang out in or the parents to stand and watch them play. So there's a lot of opportunities on the HACA properties, especially, but it doesn't have to be just a HACA property.
Yeah. And I'm willing to, you know, propose using myself if need be to as a grant writer, because I have a proposal writing firm, to participate in any grant writing that needs to take place to solidify funding for rehauling of redoing of playground areas so that they are more safe and more manageable of the stormwater, because they all at this point flood crazily, and it's not very it sits there for very long times.
Right. And then you can't
Creates,
even use the playground. Right.
Right. It creates mosquitoes. It trash and needles and drugs from, drug addicts and stuff like that. So proper lighting at some of these playground areas. I just wanted to, and then energy too. With the winter coming, looking at some potential energy support that we can create or galvanize for people that have from low income. And then also the mold issue as well. So still on that. But also
Thanks.
some type
Oh,
of
sorry,
hiring some type of hiring authority for minority owned vendors, so that each and every contract that goes out by the city of Annapolis to do any type of environmental restoration be hired by a minority owned vendor, or some a portion of that, some type of authority that creates that type of venue. I think that would be very a plus, a very positive thing to tout that the city is doing as it relates to making things more equitable and kind of breaking up some of these environmental monopolies. So. That was it. That's all I had.
Well, maybe Randy, you have your briefing. We have you later on in the agenda, so I'm hoping we can come back to a couple of those things. And I think if you can think of a couple of specific recommendations for Allison's letter as it relates to the backyard tree 3321, that would be helpful. I'm not sure how. I need to think about how sort of choosing which arborist would come could be part of it. And that leads me to a question for the rest of the group, because Jeremy and Bill and, we all have a lot of questions. Would you like to get the amended bill from Rob and a draft letter from Allison and reconvene again next week so we can sort of vote and be a little more in the know? Or do we all feel like we know enough to make a vote this evening? I know, Rob, that you're under a time crunch, but maybe you could tell us when you would need to hear from us by.
I guess by I'm trying to set up a special environmental matters committee meeting to hear this. But I don't think I'm going to be able to get one next week. So if you can get it within 2 weeks, then we could bring it up at our next meeting, environmental matters meeting.
Oh, also, Anne, I'm not sure if I'm correct about this, but Paul dropped off and you only have 4 members on. So I'm not sure if there's enough to vote. I forget how many members. It should be 9, but there are 7 now.
Yeah, so I think we are.
So, okay, I think you're okay then. I apologize.
No. I'm glad you mentioned. I didn't notice that Rob. I didn't notice that Paul had dropped off. Hopefully, he and Smokey will be back.
And I do need to drop off myself, though. So if there's nothing else
and
for
we've
me,
taken you over your time.
it's okay. All right, thank you all for your
Any
help with this.
questions?
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us,
Bye.
Rob. Thank you. Okay. Bill, any preference? Would you like to vote this evening, or do you want to reconvene next week?
Well, I may not be available next week, depending upon the day. But you know what? I can find time next week. We'll just make it happen.
I guess, are we? Can we vote if it's not one of our broadcasted meetings. I thought we needed to have like these open meetings in order to do things like votes, and we can only do like business meetings privately offline.
I hear you, Jeremy. I think you're right. I think we would have to find a time that Eric or someone on the city staff and would be available to have the public meeting online. And, you know, it would likely not be our regular evening time because of the other commissions that meet on a regular schedule that already have those slots. So I think I'm sort of taking it on faith that we can make it work. But we can also take a vote this evening. We just can't not have a meet. If we want to vote on this sometime in the future, we probably have to schedule an extra meeting because we can't do it over email. And we probably won't be of any use if we wait until October meeting.
Right.
You know, I don't know. I was sort of imagining a 20-minute meeting at lunchtime, but maybe I'm being too optimistic.
Well, that would be perfect. It's the evenings that are tough.
We have soccer games to be at.
Yeah.
How about Jeremy, Randy, how are you feeling about this? Do you feel like you know enough to be able to vote this evening? Do you want to wait?
You all sent something out for us to review to vote on, correct? Or are we just going off the discussion today?
That's the discussion today. We do have Allison's letter, which would, in substance, be many of the same points about the sort of Forest Conservation Act in general.
Okay. Did anything change, or did we, as of tonight, was there any changes or anything?
From the printed version, there are 2 amendments that we discussed tonight, and those were the ones to allow the city arborist to waive the fee in lieu or mitigation in cases of hardship, or if the property owner has planted trees within the past 5 years that were not a result of mitigation requirements. And the second amendment is that for each permit applied for is reviewed separately unless it's a larger area where multiple trees are coming down, like if it's a clearing for development, I think is what that amendment is going for.
Okay.
So that the arborist doesn't have to write a permit for every individual tree.
I think I'm ready to vote as of that quick little discussion there. Thank you, Allison and Ann.
Yeah, and if we want to vote tonight, I'm comfortable with the letter dealing with the ordinance 34. Like closing that loophole makes sense to me, and we already have the Forest Conservation Act, so we're just trying to close that loophole. I personally don't think I'm in a spot to vote that I would support personally the other bill 33, just because I need to understand it, need to understand the possible scope better personally. I definitely like a lot of portions of the bill, like blacklisting or the taking away the ability of certain like contractors who violate it multiple times. I think is a great step, but without more information about the scope, I'm just concerned that it might negatively impact other efforts that I think we want as a city, like the ability to allow people to, if they're taking down trees to add a ADU or something, I think it's more beneficial to the city as a whole than, say, just taking down trees for no reason. For example, I think overall, I want to see the city have more development of higher density residential options, so we can maybe see more affordable housing in the long run, and get also a lot of the other crucial development and infrastructure we need, like childcare facilities and the like. And so I just get a little heartburn with that bill in particular, process and potential impacts without further data about the scope.
No, you bring up an excellent point, Jeremy, and I think that part of what you're getting at is what a big focus of the comprehensive plan, and targeting certain areas for denser development to promote walkability and more affordable housing. So I wonder, Jackie, if you could weigh in on if there's an opportunity that we could sort of point back to the draft comprehensive plan as a way of, again, maybe giving Brian or the arborist more leeway, or, for a homeowner to make their case, or a developer to make a case for how, a removal would be in keeping with the, comprehensive plan?
You're asking me to weigh in on how the comp plan fits in with this ordinance. Right now, it does not. It's not tied to it any specific way. It's tied to it's tied to achieving our tree canopy goal.
But could you maybe respond to Jeremy's point that there could be, is there a potential conflict between the sort of designation of certain zones of the city as candidates for denser development and that sort of call for more sort of sustainability and walkability as part of the comprehensive plan, and this tree removal
Well, sure. If there's a tree in the way and it's not permitted to be taken down unless under certain circumstances, and you cannot build something there because of that requirement, then yes, there will be a conflict.
Okay. I hear you. I wonder, do you think it would be valuable for us to ask the question that Jeremy's asked about, if there's removal in certain cases for the greater good to meet some of those other comprehensive plan goals?
That's not, I don't believe that's currently in the ordinance. I believe that's something I recommended early on when Alderman Savage was drafting this legislation. I said, something like trees that aren't within X amount of distance from a house, because someone might want to add on a deck or a screen porch or something like that. Or, I suggested things like that, if it would be in the way of something that we would want to encourage. You might want to think about those kinds of things and making amendments.
My understanding is it may not outright prohibit it, but there would just be mitigation required, 4-to-1 mitigation.
Right.
You could still take the tree down, but you would have to plant 4 new trees.
Thanks, Allison. That's helpful. And thank you, Jackie. Well, one thing, we're over our time for this discussion, so we have to sort of resolve what we're going to do and then move on to Jackie's briefing on Hillman Garage and other aspects of their work. I wonder if we could do something like we've done. Oh, shoot, I can't quite remember which issue it was, but several months ago, we captured both questions and concerns in addition to things that we liked about either a bill or a development. I can't remember which. So rather than us voting on a letter in support of this particular ordinance, perhaps we could start with a letter that highlights the things that we're enthusiastic about and ask some questions like the ones that Jeremy brought up.
Yeah, because the ones that Jeremy's point is well taken. And that was one of the points, as I said, I was trying to make to Alderman Savage when he was considering this bill. Because it's not that you can take down the tree, that's incorrect. The tree, you can remove the tree, they're less than 5 inches in diameter, measured at 4.5 feet DBH. But you cannot remove a tree that's greater than 5 inches in diameter without first obtaining the permit, and only if you meet certain requirements, which are that in the instance of 23 inches in diameter and greater, unless the city arborist has inspected the tree and he finds that the tree is showing signs of significant decline or it represents a public safety hazard. So you can't just take it down. Can't always just take it down and to mitigate. Your permit won't be issued. And the permit, it specifically says, and I just pulled this up again, a permit may be denied if sufficient evidence has not been provided and confirmed by the city arborist that the tree meets at least one of the conditions. It's dead, dying, or diseased, such that 50% or more of the crown is visibly dead. The tree is damaged or injured to the extent that it is likely to die or become diseased. 3, the removal of the tree will serve the purposes of this chapter or will enhance the health of the remaining trees in the conservation area. So then they go on, it has parts about mitigation to reduce a substantial hardship to the property or any structure located thereon. That's another criteria. So there are some, Jeremy's point is well taken. Yeah. And I something I considered early on when he was drafting this.
Can I make a proposal for the good of the order? Can I propose that we work on a letter of both questions and concerns and things that we like about the ordinance, and do it as a Google Doc so we can all throw some questions in there and we can talk over email, maybe have a deadline by the end of this week or the beginning of next week to put those questions and comments and concerns in. And then we can see if we need to have a meeting or if we can simply send our letter as it is, which is not a letter in support, but rather just sort of a collection of questions. But does that sound okay to you all? Allison, I see your hand up. And Randy?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I will be out of pocket all next week. I will be out of town. So sounds like we're moving in a little bit different direction than the original proposal. So I may have to turning that into a full letter over to someone else if we're on a short time crunch.
Yeah. Thanks, Allison. We'll figure that out. You could maybe get us started with the initial Google Doc and we'll give everybody some instructions over email. I'm sure Bevan will want to weigh in. Randy, I can't tell if your hand's up for now or if it was up earlier. Sorry.
Sorry, that was up from earlier. Sorry.
Okay, so we'll table this discussion of 3321 to Google Docs and email, and then ask Eric and the kind folks at the city to help us with another meeting should we need one. Does that sound all right?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, friends. All righty, well, it's 8 o'clock and we're 20 minutes behind schedule. Jackie, would you and Racine like to give us a update on some of the work that you're doing now? We have Hillman Garage and the Greenway plan as particular highlights listed in the agenda.
Okay, so why don't I do this? I'll just touch on those two and people can ask questions on those. And then what I did is I sent you today the Resilience and Sustainability Current Projects list. And I will continue to do that on the Monday before every meeting. I provide this to the Environmental Standing Committee. So I do it anyway for them. This one's a little bit updated from the one I submitted last week to them. But so if there's anything on there later you want to ask questions about, please do so. So
thanks, Jackie. Yeah, it's a long list. I didn't get a chance to read it. So
there's a lot. Some of these projects are things where we have the lead on, some we are involved in, and some we initiate and we hand off to other departments eventually. But Hillman Garage. So Hillman, remember I think that there was a presentation to this commission on Hillman, if I'm recollecting correctly, sometime in the last few months. And I was asked to submit comments to the planning commission on it and e-track it as well, which I did, and attended some of the planning commission meetings on it, including last week. Yes, it was just last week again, to reiterate some of the considerations that I did not see incorporated. I did share some of my comments with all of you previously, but some of the green.
Jackie, can I ask just like a totally ground zero question? The Hillman Garage project is part of the City Dock Resiliency Project, isn't it?
No, it's not. It's
Okay.
they get discussed together quite a bit because the numbers get thrown around together. But
they weren't part of the same RFP then, or?
Well, the same company bid on doing both projects. So I think, but they are separate projects funded separately. Some of the city dock project is a public works project that's being funded with state, city, and grant money. Hillman Garage is a whole separate project. And
Gotcha.
Hillman will be performed first. Demolition is expected to start in January. It's about 14 to 18 month project. So that project is winding its way through boards and commissions for approvals. Planning Commission had a number of comments on it when they heard it last week. One of their most, the biggest objections to it at this point, they think that a lot has been done to service the public, to a lot of the environmental parts of it they really like, which I'll just list for you in a minute. But their objection mostly is to the aesthetic appearance. They don't think it blends in quite enough with the look of Annapolis, and it's not green enough, which I completely agreed with. And I sent the Department of Planning and Zoning a number of pictures of how you can literally make a garage more green with plant life, including at the top, along the top wall, incorporating planter boxes as part of the wall. So plants can either be grasses growing out of it or plants that cascade down the side. There's some metal involved in the walls of the garage as screening devices to screen the look of the cars. And those are perfect areas for green walls or climbing ivy or cascading greens as well. So fortunately, the Planning Commission really agreed with those comments, and they were I had already submitted them, but they were bringing it up on their own. And then I'm sure residents who live on Green Street right against the garage would feel the same way, that they'd rather see it blend into the natural background more. But some of the highlights on the green part of the garage is, number one, the garage was built before stormwater requirements. So it now has, is being treated to the 100% redevelopment, 75%, it's redevelopment. So it's 75% at the stormwater capture and treatment must occur. So that's a combination of routing the stormwater into silvicels where new trees will be planted, into receiving green beds and gathered from areas where it was just cascading off the roof or off the sidewalks, but directing all stormwater in the area into a green receptor, so a naturally green receptor for capture and filtration before it continues on its way. There's a solar, you may have seen, some of you may have seen the drawings, but there's a carport type of structure on the roof of the new garage plan. And on top of that are solar panels. So there had been comments by the Planning Commission, and they were reiterating them the other night. Sorry, cat is back. And they would have preferred to have seen that solar array extended across the entire roof. The designer thought that it would present a better visual landscape from the street if it was smaller. I don't know if that was a Historic Preservation Commission requirement. I do not think it was. But the Planning Commission is making comments about, we're losing potential solar capture there by not extending across the entire roof. One objective for the top of that roof is to also hold events there. So it could be used for more than one purpose. Well, if that's the case, then having a covered area, completely covered area, would be beneficial, and having the plant life that I was describing, not in planters that would take up space, but actually built into the wall, would benefit that space. The lighting is LED lighting, of course, and it is, I suggested that make sure they're setting it on timers, that they are tempering the brightness depending on time of day. Lights don't have to be as bright during the day as they might not need to be at night for visibility and safety purposes. There's wayfinding incorporated so that there's not a lot of driving and idling looking for parking spaces. There will be EV spaces added. Currently, it's designed for 9 EV spaces, which was one of my questions. What type of chargers are you putting there? Does that mean 4 L2s and 1 DC fast charge, or what combination? And one of my comments was 9 spaces is not enough for a garage of 624 spaces. Currently, I just want to point out, Annapolis does not have in its code a requirement for EV units in parking lots, or for including any new builds, which many cities have gone to. If you have a parking lot that it's based either on occupancy or number of parking spaces, and we are looking at that now. We've suggested that Department of Planning and Zoning to make that revision, and they're very receptive to it. So in response to my comment about that I'd submitted, the designer said that they are putting in 9 spaces available for charging, but they're making the garage EV ready for more. And I already spoke to the city manager. I think that we need to put more in right from the start, just not make it EV ready, because the future, the automotive industry is aiming for 50% of all of its sales to be EV by 2030. But they know they'll get to at least 35% of their sales, but they're aiming higher than that. So that's a lot of EV just by 2030. So this garage should be a little bit more EV ready than it is being designed to be currently. There's going to be bicycle parking as well. The garage will be smaller than its current footprint, but yet have about 200 more spaces because it's going up another level. And they're also maximizing parking space on the ramps. So the ramps will be a little wider. There'll be parking space on the ramps. And the egress and ingress will be wider and safer as well. They're also designing the structure to be adaptive so that in the future, when it's projected that people may not be driving as much or using cars as much to get around, this space could be converted over to condos or other businesses. But the first floor is already being designed so that it could be, it's very open to the much wider sidewalk along Gorman, so that there could be used for pop-up shops, festivals, dining, that sort of thing. So trying to make more use of Gorman is not just this little dark alley that people kind of scurry through, but actually as a space that could be usable and is friendly and inviting. Well, I think that's the most of the, I know someone, especially if Bevan were here, she would say, where are the permeable pavers? And that was one of my comments, is at least the sidewalk areas should be permeable pavers. I understand that the rest of it cannot be because of the heavy traffic. That was looked into by the designers, and they found that the soils were not compatible with permeable pavers. They were not, and that's the case, unfortunately, in many parts of Annapolis. We either have, really compacted clay soils that don't allow infiltration. So it's not worth putting the permeable pavers in because you're not going to get any additional stormwater capture.
Hello?
Hello, Paul.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm walking my child, so I can't, on my phone, I couldn't find the raise the hand. So if I may just briefly barge in and proceed. Okay.
Yeah, please.
thank you, Jackie. That was excellent. And my only small disagreement when you said 9 spots isn't enough, it's, as you know, it's nowhere enough. That's 1.5% of the parking garage. So
Right.
sometimes it helps to put it, as you just said, the auto industry is racing towards electric. And if we, say right now, you guys are looking at 1.5%, it just makes it look pathetically underwhelmed.
Yeah.
I probably not the time now, and perhaps it could just be a link to a few paragraphs, but I think it would be interesting for a lot of us to say, okay, what's it cost to put in 10 chargers versus what's it cost to have a facility ready for 10 chargers, right? Like, it probably means the power's up to whatever near surface level and they got to do some more. So it'd be interesting to see what the cost difference between completely ready, plug your car in versus, it's wired for that, but you then have to add the charging heads on. And, because I know it's different, but it's kind of sad on Main Street when they offered, fire sprinkler, right? Water into the businesses, and the city was willing to pay most of it, but the shopkeeper had to pay the $3,000 for the final 70-foot connection, and most of them didn't do it. To go do it now and jackhammer the road, it's probably a $30,000 item. So what I'm saying in a nutshell is, I just want to make sure we're not doing something where for another 30% we could have it fully operational. So yeah, I'm just trying to be efficient on that. But backing up to my single point, anybody who's specking out 1.5% of the garage for solar, needs to almost 6 or 10-fold their thoughts. Other than that, thank you.
All right, yes, and Paul, what part of the infrastructure costs are already going to be covered in the bill, because that's putting the heavy up and the equipment needed to power the units, the charging units. So that's going to happen already. So, and if they're making it EV ready for more units, it has to be already built out to that. It's the running of the lines, et cetera. They're going to do that anyway. The units themselves can range around $3,500 each. The more you purchase, obviously, the cost goes down. And I'm not sure if planning and zoning shared this with our designers. I need to make sure they do. BG&E is willing to give us at least 3 chargers in that building. So that's 3 that the city's not paying for. So we should be able then to, that's 3 more that we could be throwing in, built in the cost of the garage, because we're not paying for 3.
Yeah, and I would imagine, Jackie, that there would be other third-party charging vendors like EVgo or something that would also welcome the opportunity to sort of lease the space from you if you can figure out the metering or the electric charges. So, I mean, I suppose that's maybe one point in the camp of EV, some of it charger ready rather than charger installed. But can I ask, Jackie, I'm looking at the clock. I'm sorry, Paul. Go ahead. Paul, go ahead.
I think he was talking to Smokey.
Oh,
okay.
They'd be great to work with.
Okay. Well, Jackie, I'm looking at the clock and I want to make sure we also talk about the Greenway. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the timeline for the project and if you think it would be valuable for us to weigh in with a letter at this point, or if you feel like between you and the Planning Commission, enough of the environmental sort of questions and concerns have been brought to the attention of the developers.
So Planning and Zoning had asked that all comments be submitted by September 15th. And then once they put out their draft for Annapolis 2040 ahead, or 2040 Annapolis ahead, which is the name of the comp plan, there'll be another period of about 60 days for comments from the public on that. When that draft will come out is uncertain at this point. It may be after the November election. So there will be additional time to comment. However, I did confirm with Eric Lashinsky today, so that I could have the most up-to-date information for you, that he will still accept comments between now and whenever they put it out. So I encourage you sooner rather than later to submit additional comments on the comp plan. There's been about 150 or so comments submitted by other people other than staff on the comp plan, which they've been incorporating. And that's one reason it's taken a bit longer. So there, what Eric is saying is there's time, but get them in so that he can incorporate them into the draft that he releases.
Okay, thanks. Because I know that Bevan and Randy have been working on all of the JEDI recommendations, and I think some of those were sort of earmarked for the comp plan. And Bevan was working with Allison and Jeremy, I believe, on reviewing earlier drafts. And so I think we still may have some comments, but I'm not sure of the status of like where our evaluation and comments sort of slotted into the drafts, if that makes sense.
And I was hoping to be able to relay with this commission's permission to Eric that you're working on some additional comments and you will have them to him by mid-October. Does that sound doable?
It does, and it could be that that's just reiterating comments that we've already submitted before, and maybe applauding how they've been incorporated into the plan, or encouraging that they're incorporated with greater clarity or emphasis. So I can't really speak to where we are at with our internal process on the comp plan. So if anybody else can, but I think we would welcome continued opportunity to add comments.
And just to your particular question about the greenway, that is green spaces and green connectivity is interwoven through various parts. I think Eric has pointed this out to the commission before. And some of these parcels are parks and some of them are lands that could be connected better. And he's looking at, I think with the suggestion from this commission, it came from some neighborhood greenways. So looking at neighborhoods and how there could be a particular greenway and connectivity throughout a neighborhood. And then looking, it may not connect in like a big circle greenway around the whole city, but there would be, neighborhood greenways. It's one of them.
Thanks. I was thinking about that, Jackie, today when I walked through the new pocket park next to Ceremony, which I'm excited about. But the parcel next door to that pocket park has a sidewalk. The pocket park does not. And the parcel on the other side of the sidewalk, also, it doesn't continue.
So those are the kind of
like
comments
that.
Yeah, but those are the kind of connectivity comments that, people on the ground that are actually using it, which are constructive. And then I believe Eric has mentioned to this commission before, some parking lots that aren't being fully utilized, such as the giant parking lot on Forest Drive, or no, it's Bay Ridge at that point. They're large and they're not being utilized, and they could be green space, and they could be green space that connects to other green spaces.
Well, that's exciting. And so unless anyone has an objection, I think we can have Jackie say that we'll follow up with Eric within the next month on some additional feedback. And maybe we can ask Bevan to sort of circle the wagons on where we're at with our comp plan review and comments, because I confess to not knowing. Anybody else have more info? Okay.
Yeah, I do think that the comments that come from this commission are very valuable. I think they're very well put together. So I encourage you to do that and submit them.
Thanks, Jackie. Well, we're over time. Jackie, while you have the floor, is there anything else you'd like to add, or should we move on to the end of our agenda?
Let's move on.
Okay, let's try to end at 8:30, friends. I looked at the development and restoration review, and nothing jumped off the table at me, but Allison or anybody else who reviewed it, did you see any projects that we should look at in greater detail?
I didn't see any new projects, but the only update I'll provide for everybody on Bimby Beach, and I think Racine sent out some info to us earlier, but that was resubmitted and went out for agency review, and I believe the comments were due back in the middle of August. So I think that's probably back with planning and zoning now for their review. And I submitted comments. At this point, I can't remember if they were personal comments or on behalf of the commission. I think I did submit comments on behalf of the commission, but basically just reiterating from the resubmitted application, what are the things that were still outstanding that hadn't been addressed from the previous round.
Thanks for doing that, Allison.
And I do have one on the Cars Beach, Chesapeake Grove development. So that was presented to this commission, the development. But the negotiations are still going on by the city to purchase that property. So even though a lot of work has been done by the developer, they are still willing to talk to the city about selling the property. There's a big price tag on it. There's been 2 appraisals, I think in the $15 million range. And we're getting a 3rd appraisal on that property. Yeah, because of the development potential, Allison. As our eyes bug out. And so there's a 3rd appraisal that's supposed to be the most accurate one that is being performed. And then we probably would be looking to the county to donate some money, the city to kick in some money, and then looking for some program open space money for that property. So that entire parcel would be put into preservation to conservate with a conservation easement on it. And it would be managed by, the Maritime Museum, and they could have educational events there. Now, the developer, as you know, did provide public access to the beach, some limited public access as part of his plan. But if the city owned it, then there would be full public access to it. And you'd be convenient parking over by the Maritime Museum, and then you could go across the road to the property. So that would be the best outcome, I think.
Yeah, and I'll just flag, Jackie, I don't know if it fits into the process or the timing works out, but maybe it would be a good property to flag for the discussions going around about the Chesapeake National Recreation Area. I know that they're looking to do some land acquisition as part of that.
I'm involved with that whole process as well. So that's on my radar. Thank you, Allison.
Okay, thanks for that update, Allison and Jackie. Randy, you're next on the agenda to give us an update on our JEDI initiatives. And you brought up a couple of wonderful comments regarding our extreme weather event a couple of weeks ago. I wonder if that's something that we could address on our agenda next meeting, or if there's anything that we could work on in the meantime, if they dovetail with our recommendations on the comp plan or anything else that we're working on.
Yes, hello. And yes, you're right. That does so I do have some updates. One being the memo. I wanted to try to maybe get some more discussion about. I actually would like to hear from each member, if they could, about just how they feel about it. And I have a pretty good idea for kind of defining or refining or fine-tuning or smallering the document or what it says. Just before I went into kind of redrafting, I wanted to get some feedback. Also, using the weather events that took place as a segue kind of to that memo. I think it could definitely make the case for that, and maybe even looking into some data that could be obtained as to how those weathering events affected some low-income citizens, because that data is, of course, a way to kind of control the narrative and also make the case for funding allocations that could be made, whether it be at the city, state, government level, or what have you, or even in this private sector, where it could be some fundraising initiatives that take place, like a fund for a potential devastating weathering event that could take place. I think that being so close to the water here in Annapolis, it's kind of like a no-brainer, and it kind of makes you wonder why something like this hasn't existed already. How are we just thinking about this? This kind of is really important as it relates to climate change and coastal scarce situation that we are near. So I want to talk about that. And then I also wanted to talk about, because I do this for a couple other kind of groups and organizations, sharing out with the commission group just different videos or media or articles that come out here and there, just about kind of JEDI topics as it relates to environmental isms and such, and natural resource management. What you all thought about that? I would love to hear what each of you all think about that. And if I guess email is a good way to share that out, I can share those out kind of regularly. So I wanted to hear you all's thoughts on that. And then also I wanted to talk about an environmental hiring authority for minority-owned vendors for any and all contracts or a portion of contracts that are put out by the city of Annapolis. The state with MDOT, I think his name is Michael Zimmerman. I'm not sure if he still is in charge of that program, but he runs that at the state level. And what they do is they basically just award a certain portion or percentage of their bids to minority-owned vendors that submit bids for contracts as it relates to, in this case, natural resource management. So anything that has a relation to any of those things. And lastly, I wanted to get you all's thoughts on the kind of internship field, environmental internship development aspects of AEC or environmental things, because I feel like there's an opportunity for the commission to, if not just share resources or do outreach or just share expertise with us in the group or me, so that we could utilize some of that as it relates to the internships. I currently work in my day job for CRC, and we are in the midst of creating an advisory council or like an advisory committee that will basically work with me on implementing different portions of the NSF award that we have. So through National Fish and Wildlife, we're looking to do some things. So just wanted to get you all's thoughts on that, because I think that there's a lot of great expertise in this group and even in the groups that you may know of or affiliated with. I think that you all have some great networks that maybe could refer different people that could potentially serve on the advisory council for Chesapeake Research Consortium's C-Stream program. And that's about it. I also mentioned a while back, and some people did provide feedback, but oftentimes people have me review different job descriptions or announcements, things that go out to see how they relate to different JEDI practices. And so if any other team ever wants to review some of those things, you can feel free to let me know, because I think I did post something once in a Google Drive, but it happens regularly. But if that's something that some of you all would agree to or want to agree to, let me know. That way I can, when it comes my way, I can just send it right to those people when I get them. So that's all I had.
Thanks, Randy. Allison?
Sure. Thank you for that update, Randy. Lots of good stuff in there. I just wanted to endorse you continuing, at least to me, if not the whole group, continuing to send around any of the resources that you come across, because I find them super helpful and this group helpful in terms of information sharing. So you have my vote for continuing to share those as you come across them, and really appreciate your offer to help review job descriptions. If you have a little blurb or something that you could send us about who you're looking for the advisory panel, I'd be happy to think on that a little bit more and see if there's anybody who I can circulate that to.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. Will do.
And to get back to the first thing you were talking about, working on the memo and getting our feedback, I feel like one of the things that gets lost in these meetings is this JEDI section, because often it's kind of at the end and we're all starting to be a little sleepy and we run over. So I wonder, we don't have to have a public meeting to have a workshop where we're discussing writing a memo, and maybe we can find a lunch hour or something sometime in the next few weeks where we get together and only talk about the JEDI memo recommendations and some of the other sort of initiatives that we're interested in pursuing or think that we can have a particular impact on. And, I think there are things that it would be a useful conversation to have about which things like we could take on as an environmental commission and which ones we could make as sort of formal recommendations to then say pass on to the procurement officer in the city or Jackie's office or whatever it is that, some things might be we could really work on, and some things we might want to write up as a memo and sort of try to hand off. So I'd welcome another focused conversation sort of just about that, if you're up for it.
Yep. Yeah.
In addition to your day job, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Or maybe what we do is, have our next meeting start with this and really have a workshop session rather than just,
Yeah. I mean, and even something that could exist on the city's homepage, on the environmental page and on that area. I think that just something that will stand to some type of JEDI resources or JEDI developments, JEDI discussions and events and that are related to JEDI type stuff. I think that having a centralized location for that would be helpful for some in that regard. And this could kind of be where we can try to start kind of building it out from here, see how I can get it more developed, where some of us can manage it or me or some partnership. But yeah, also, I mentioned this before about the playgrounds and such. I was thinking about just what could be done in that regard. So I'd love to talk, if anybody knows of some opportunities where we can go for some funding, to get some funding to kind of overhaul or redo or redevelop or redesign all of the playgrounds in the city of Annapolis. Public housing.
Randy, I was going to suggest that we make the recommendation to Rec and Parks that should become part of their budget. They may not be able to do everything and they might have to go out for some grant money as well, but that should be an important part of their budget.
Yeah, when you say Recs and Parks, what I'm trying to make the correlation here to the world or to the city or the group or the work, commission, is that there should be kind of a connection with Recs and Parks and the environmental stuff, because there's a big connection there. A lot of times people in Recs and Parks just generally don't understand the complexity of the environmental issues that they're being faced that overlap with Recs and Parks, but they don't have that technical understanding of that. Yeah. So it takes a professional kind of in our spaces to advocate to them and say, hey.
But fortunately in Archie, we have someone who's receptive to that. He knows he doesn't have the answers or knows what questions to be asking all the time. But he is very receptive to us.
I talk to Archie all the time. This is what Archie always says. I don't know, where's the money? We don't have the money to do nothing.
I know,
we
but
wanted,
Archie needs to go after that money. He needs
That's
to
what
put
I'm
it in
saying.
his budget. He needs to, well, we should make recommendations directly to, like, again, what Ann's suggesting, we should be making recommendations to the departments who are responsible for, you know, what these things like, in this case, playgrounds. That's rec and parks. They should make it a priority. And Archie's always talking about ways to get kids involved, and these are places where kids play. So I think we should go out, we should make that recommendation to them.
Yeah, and I think if Bevan were here, she would say something about Project Open Space grants that we never get, or but should.
Yeah.
So,
and we're looking at,
wonder,
I'll make sure, Randy, too, that when I was talking to Director Johnson about stormwater controls in areas that don't always leap to the front, that we look at the parks and making sure that the playgrounds are adequately drained, you know, so they get them back online as fast as possible after a rain event or whatever happens. And just, you know, to note for future meetings, Director Johnson and I over the summer were discussing how to, this group has discussed several times that our stormwater controls are not strong enough to keep up with the impacts of climate change, the velocity, the frequency, the intensity of storms and rain events. But, you know, we're talking about looking at this fall, he's going to make this an assignment for some of the stormwater engineers to an overhaul of our sediment and erosion control requirements to make us resilient, not just, so the objective is to be resilient and not just chasing after, and to look at what's coming at us, not just in tomorrow or in 5 years, but in 10 years, and create a much more resilient code around stormwater. So I think we have that.
That's exciting.
Department of Public Works, and with Department of Planning and Zoning, we should note that they're already receptive to the idea of a EV charging requirement per number of spaces or occupancy or wherever it is. And it shouldn't just be looked at as this is a, you know, wealthier people thing. No, people of all incomes might choose to drive electric if they could. If you live in an apartment building and there's no place to charge, you're not going to buy one. Plain and simple. Randy, can't hear you.
Oh.
No, I can.
Can you, even with the grants thing, like if I was to go to Archie's going to say, well, we need grants. He doesn't write grants, so he would need a grant writer. So again, goes back. They were back all the way around to square one all over again. So
I know every time I come to Archie with an idea, he's like, "That's a great idea. What are you going to implement it for me?"
Yeah. So again, that would put us right back to square one. And I know that personally because I've done it before, working with him on several different projects that we've worked on together, partnered on.
Randy, would it be useful? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry, Randy. I was just going to ask. So, but would it be useful to say invite Archie and maybe the Annapolis Conservation Board to our next meeting to just talk about some kinds of projects that we could work on together, or maybe do a pilot playground project?
That's a great idea. And then he could call and give you all, I mean, he could come in and give you all right from his mouth how difficult it is for him to find funding to say things like, I don't know, overhaul all of the playground areas and make them more sustainable and make them more valuable or safe because of the challenges he's faced against as it relates to allocating different aspects of his budget, hiring a grant writer to do some of those things that you all are saying. Just working. You know, it's not that. It's a little bit more complex than that, honestly. So
honestly, it's a matter of budgeting the money to Parks and Rec to do the work in the first place. And if we're, you know, saying that we want kids outside recreating, that's important. We're saying that we want low-income kids to have opportunities to go outside and recreate. That needs to be a priority of the city.
Paul Murphy here.
Okay.
Hello? Hello, everyone.
Hi, we can hear you.
So excellent conversation, Jackie and Randy, what you're speaking about with, busy city managers. I'm sitting here thinking, well, that, it's what you guys talk about, silos of expertise. Archie's great. All these people are great. And Jackie's out there stretching herself, trying to pull different silos together. So it kind of gets back to the Cabinet Creek. Has Parks and Recs been to any Cabinet Creeks? Have we had a Cabinet Creek meeting in the last, how many Cabinet Creek meetings have we had in the last 18 months? One? I don't know. And then the other topic.
We've had like 3.
3? Good.
We're going to have one in October, by the way, Paul.
I don't mean to knock it too much. I didn't know. I hadn't heard as much, and I think it's a very important piece. I'm not trying to so much count how many you've had, but it sounds like Archie ought to be involved in those. And there's the shared expertise, and shared divvying up a task between a couple. Sharing. The burdens of design and building these things amongst a couple of departments might be helpful. Just a little bit more collaboration, I guess, is what I'm saying. The other thing I wanted to say about EV charging is, we also want to point out to the people putting the charging stations in, whether that's the city or the private partners running the garage or, Birch Havens Yacht Yard, whatever. We want to point out to them they're modest little profit centers. When you drive your gasoline car into any shopping center anywhere, the guy with the parking spot's not making any money selling you fuel. Where if you have a charging station in your business, it's like, yeah, I got people to come in and I make a couple of nickels an hour off charging their cars. So it's, I want to turn around when it's not always looking like a burden, and sometimes not only to Hans clients, but literally a modest, but another revenue stream for businesses or larger businesses, Eastport Shopping Center, et cetera. It should be more of a carrot for them. And I think we all know 15 years from now, the cost of solar is going to be peanuts, and it's going to be, so many people will want it. So that's just my other thing is EV should be looked as a good thing. I think business owners, large entity areas want to put in because it will be a nice little profit or revenue center for them. So I just don't want everything to they always think of it as a burden. So that's my 2 points. Cabinet Creek and EV charging is actually a positive for people who have large parking lots.
Thanks, Paul. Well, friends, I'm looking at the clock and we're closing in on 20 minutes over, but I want to sort of wrap up our conversation and make sure Randy has, our commitment for next steps. So what do you all think? Do you think we should have a workshop before our next meeting where we talk about the JEDI memo and some of our recommendations, or would you like to make that our primary focus for our next meeting? And is there some work, I know, Randy, you wanted individual feedback from us, but is there some work we could be doing on Google Docs or over email? I'm sorry, Randy, I can't see you. Are you on mute?
I'm sorry, yes. I'm here. So you say you were asking others or me?
Kind of everybody, how can we move forward as a group?
I'm gonna send out an email after this meeting, and I'm just gonna kind of bullet point out what I just kind of discussed, and anybody that wants to add info or in details or input or direction can just reply to that email to me or to the group, either one. And the Google Doc is already there, so we'll just be able to already all see that when I make those updates. I will, and then we could just go from there. Yes.
That sounds good, and I think that we can certainly work with Bevan to make it at the top of the agenda next month, and especially if we're how much of it relates to our comprehensive plan comments. Okay.
And
Yes, sir.
should Randy or someone with expertise in that field attend the next Cabinet Creek meeting? Or, I know that's a limited group, but obviously people have value or want to learn. There's room at the table for, people wanting to make things better, whatever, stripes they're wearing. So who else should Randy or some of the other people be at the Cabinet Creek meeting? Jackie,
Randy is a member. Randy is a member of the Cabinets Creek. Archie is a member of the Creeks. Well, it's the Waterways Cabinet.
I've never heard of Cabinet Creek. Are you talking about the
It's the Waterways Cabinet.
Okay,
It's the
gotcha.
Waterways Cabinet. So
Well, we
Randy's
haven't
a
met in
member.
a few months. I don't know.
Yeah, so we had a smaller meeting just to go over the stormwater workflow requirements. We had that in August, and the next one is scheduled for October. We had a hold the date message went out last week for October the 12th from 9 to 10:30.
Yeah, the mayor told me he wanted to partner with me on that, but he said he was going to wait to get funding or something, and then I guess the funding was got, but I never had.
Partner with you on what, Randy?
I guess the Hawkins Cove project.
Oh, Hawkins Cove. No, we have the funding on that. It's going into design, so the RFP has to go out for design build now. So we're just at that point. Nothing's been implemented yet. We finished the public outreach last week.
Allison, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I didn't know if we were done, but before we wrapped up for the night, I was hoping I could have a point of personal privilege to share information on tree planting. So just let me know when and if you're ready for that.
I think we are, but have we closed the loop on the Waterways Cabinet, which is also called the Creeks Cabinet, which is also called something else?
It's the Waterways Cabinet. The mayor used to call it the Creeks Cabinet.
Okay. Well, I believe Bevan goes, and Randy's also invited, but if Jackie, you wouldn't mind sending us the note, we could maybe circulate it amongst the AEC members to make sure that our designated attendees can make it to the 12th. And if not, maybe, we can reassign.
Yeah, well, that's up to you guys. So Bevan is on it as the chair, and Randy is also a member, and different people from different commissions are. So as far as this group is concerned, if Bevan can't attend, then it's up to you whether you're sending somebody else.
Okay, all righty. But we'll circle around, and hopefully Randy can make that, and we'll check with Bevan.
But Randy's not there for the Environmental Commission.
Right.
Bevan is, so we would need a representative for Bevan for the Environmental Commission. Although he does also serve on the Environmental Commission. It would be, better if somebody else came as well.
Okay, thank you, Jackie.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Paul, does that satisfy your question and concern? Paul?
Go ahead. I didn't hear you.
Just Jackie's response about the meeting on October 12th.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. Every time Jackie responds, it makes everything fun. No, all good.
All of us could do so well. All righty. Well, thank you. Okay. Well, I think that's it for our business. So as we adjourn, Allison, let's hear about your capstone project.
Thanks. Anyways, I'll keep it really short because I'll follow up with an email to you guys. But I would love if you guys are available. I'm doing my WSA capstone project on October the 9th. It's a Saturday in Annapolis. We're going to be installing native landscape at a bioretention area. I've got 96 shrubs and 180 perennials that need to go in. So I'm looking for helping hands. So if you guys are available or know somebody who is, I will send you the link to the Sign Up Genius for it. But hopefully it'll be a good time and get some native plants in the ground. So thank you, Annie, for allowing that interjection.
Yeah, that's with Replant Anne Arundel. I put in a bid for some of those too, those tree plantings and digging holes for you guys to drop the trees in the holes and stuff. So that's pretty neat. I think I will try to take a part in that.
Yeah, come on out. I'll send you guys the link.
Cool. Congratulations too. How many trees is it?
90. Well, it's 96 shrubs and 180 perennials.
96. And this is per person or group? Like it's a group of y'all, right?
No, this is just for my personal WSA capstone project.
Gotcha. Okay. And was there a reason why you picked where they were going to be planted, or was that just they picked their place? Or
Oh, I picked it. It's actually at Chesapeake Bay Foundation's headquarters, and it's a bioretention area that has been kind of overgrown with invasives. So we're going to get those cleared out and replant it with natives.
Okay. Look at you. Okay. Yeah, I love it. So is the guy, is the what's his name? The CEO, is he gonna be there too?
I don't know. We should pressure him to show up, right?
Yeah, I just met him at this event at Maritime Museum, and we hit it off, man. We're supposed to be setting up a meeting. So
well, you should ask him that, Randy.
Yeah. So send me the details. I'm definitely gonna make him come.
All right, sounds good.
A quick interruption. Remember, regarding CEOs of Bay Foundation, Will Baker has been CEO for 35 years, and he's retiring. So make sure, if you have dialogue, make sure it's with the guy who's, or man or woman who's going to be there, not the man who's been there for 35 years, 40 years.
That's the guy I was talking about, Will Baker.
Yeah. Well,
Will is still there probably till the beginning of the year. So he's the right person.
Yeah. Oh,
but
yeah.
The Making History campaign is the one that has the goal to plant all the trees. So they should be involved too.
Who was that you said?
Shannon Lyons is in charge of the Making History campaign. But I think, no, let me back up, Randy. They're trying to plant 10 million trees in Pennsylvania. Okay. And they're trying to plant, I forgot how many, maybe it's 10 million oysters in Maryland and 1 million trees in Pennsylvania. So they're not about planting trees in Maryland so much.
10 billion.
10 billion, thank you, 10 billion.
What's the name of the, is it a name for her group or?
Yeah, it's called the Making History campaign.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's nothing about making actual history. It's like, oh, we're doing so much, CBF is making history.
Gotcha.
But her name is Shannon Lyons, Lyons. She's the director of the Making History campaign.
For CBF.
For CBF, yep. Okay. I know I've got all my millions mixed up there, Allison.
The commission should start something like that now, where we want to do 10 million or 10 billion something. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll think about that and discuss it over Allison's shrubs on the 9th. All righty, friends. Well, unless anybody has anything before we close, I think we can adjourn. Paul, is your hand up from before, or do you have a final thought?
No, it was up from before. My apologies. I'm working off my phone.
Okay, no worries. Well, I think that Racine is writing up our minutes from today. So thanks, Racine. Hopefully they make sense, and we'll be glad to chime in as you put them together.
Yeah, I'm working on the minutes from tonight, and I'll send them around.
Thanks very much for doing that. And thanks everyone for joining us this evening. Thanks, Eric, for hosting us.
No problem.
And thank you for facilitating as a great moderator today. I want to tip my hat to you. You did a very good job. Your voice is very calming, very relaxing, and you manage things very appropriate.
That's kind of you. It's just exhaustion. So thanks.